By the year 2026, 91% of European enterprises are going to deploy at least one high-risk AI system into their daily operations, which sounds great,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It sounds like progress.
But if you dig into the data, you hit this massive discrepancy. 68% of those exact same companies currently lack the automated audit trails required to make those systems legally compliant.
Yeah, that's a huge gap.
It really is.
Oh.
So look, if you are a European business leader, a CTO, or, a developer listening to this right now, consider this a ticking clock.
And that clock is ticking fast. I mean, the enforcement mechanisms are already in motion. The EUAI Act officially entered its phased timeline back in August of 2024.
Right.
And those regulatory requirements, they are accelerating dramatically right up through 2026. We are looking at a landscape where non-compliance isn't just a matter of, correcting some paperwork and paying a slap on the wrist fine.
It's way more severe than that.
Existential, honestly. For most mid-market companies, the fines can reach up to 30 million euros, or 6% of global revenue, whichever happens to be higher.
30 million euros. I mean, that kind of financial risk brings us directly to the mission of today's deep dive. We're analyzing this really comprehensive framework from AetherLink.
Great source to pull from, definitely.
Yeah, they're a Dutch AI consulting firm. And just for context, they build their operations across 3 distinct pillars, right? So there's Aetherbot for developing AI agents, Aethermind for high-level AI strategy, and AetherDV for custom AI development.
Right, and today we're really pulling from that middle pillar.
Exactly. We're focusing heavily on the insights from their Aethermind consultancy arm. Okay, let's unpack this. The core objective here is to figure out how enterprises can actually bridge this massive governance gap before the 2026 deadlines, but, without completely bankrupting their IT budgets in the process.
Because that's the trap, right? When organizations finally recognize the sheer scale of the EUAI Act compliance problem, the instinct is often to assume it's purely a software issue.
Like they just need to buy an app or something.
Exactly. They think if they just buy the right compliance dashboard, the risk just disappears. But the research points to a much deeper organizational bottleneck. The software exists, sure, but the strategic leadership required to implement it, it doesn't.
It's just not there.
The data shows only 23% of enterprises actually possess mature governance structures. And what's more concerning is that 55% are actively struggling with cross-functional AI leadership clarity.
Wait, what does that actually mean in practice? Cross-functional leadership clarity.
Well, think about it. AI touches everything now. It's in marketing, procurement, legal,
HR, yeah.
right? So because it's everywhere, nobody actually knows who holds the ultimate responsibility for ensuring those neural networks aren't breaking the law.
So when a CEO looks around and realizes there is this massive leadership vacuum regarding AI, I mean, the traditional reflex is to just go out and hire a heavyweight, full-time AI chief technology officer, like a dedicated AI CTO.
Which is the standard playbook, yeah.
But the source material highlights this fundamental flaw in that reflex. A full-time AI CTO is going to command a salary anywhere from $150,000 to well over 300,000 euros annually.
Easily.
And that's before equity, before benefits. It feels like a massive overcorrection. It's kind of like it's akin to hiring a high-end general contractor to completely redesign your entire commercial property, when all you really need is a specialized structural inspector to come in and verify that 3 specific load-bearing pillars are up to code.
That structural inspector analogy captures the dynamic perfectly. Because a traditional CTO is inherently tasked with managing the entire technology stack, right? Scaling the infrastructure, guiding the broad IT strategy.
Which is a huge job on its own.
Exactly. But if your primary immediate threat is just getting a handful of autonomous systems compliant with the EU AI Act by 2026, overhauling your entire IT leadership hierarchy is highly inefficient.
Right.
And this is why the source advocates for a much more surgical intervention. They call it the fractional AI-led architect.
The fractional model. And just to be clear on the mechanics of that, a fractional architect is an external expert who steps in for a highly specific scope of work, usually around, 10 to 20 hours a week?
Yeah, usually part-time like that.
So they aren't getting bogged down in your cloud storage contracts or dealing with, quarterly hardware upgrades for the staff.
Correct. Their mandate is isolated entirely to AI governance, compliance readiness, and agentic system architecture. They step into the organization, build the exact governance framework the legislation demands, train the internal teams to maintain it, and then they step out.
They just leave.
Yeah, they phase out. And by utilizing this fractional model, mid-market enterprises are realizing 40 to 60% cost savings compared to absorbing the overhead of a full-time executive. Plus, they gain access to this highly specialized, multi-industry expertise that is incredibly rare in the current job market.
Wow, 40 to 60% savings is massive. But, knowing that this fractional role exists is one thing. How do companies actually determine their baseline?
What do you mean?
Like, if you're running a company right now, you might suspect your AI systems are a bit messy, but how do you quantify the actual legal danger you're in before you bring this person in?
Right. So the diagnostic mechanism AetherLink uses is called the Aethermind AI Readiness Scan. It functions as a deeply comprehensive audit of a company's current state.
Okay.
The process takes about 3 to 4 weeks, requires an investment of roughly 8,000 to 15,000 euros, and it ultimately grades the organization's governance maturity on a strict 1 to 5 scale.
Got it. And what are they looking for during those weeks?
It looks under the hood at policy documentation, how the company structurally classifies risk, the existence or lack of audit trails, and the internal culture surrounding AI deployment.
I imagine the results are pretty rough for most places.
Oh, the typical outcome is a huge wake-up call. Most enterprises discover they are only operating at about 40 to 60% maturity, meaning they're facing a grueling 6 to 12-month implementation gap just to reach baseline compliance.
Just to get to the baseline. Wow. Well, to ground this in reality, the briefing outlines a really detailed case study that I found fascinating.
The Helsinki one.
Yeah, the Helsinki region. So they analyzed this 500-person manufacturing company, and over the course of 18 months, this manufacturer had enthusiastically integrated AI across their entire operation.
As everyone was doing, yeah.
Exactly. They had predictive maintenance models running on the factory floor, chatbots handling customer service, and this is the crazy part. Most critically, they had deployed autonomous procurement optimization agents. These were AI systems actively negotiating and purchasing raw materials. And they were running all of this with zero documented governance.
Which is just a profound liability.
Yeah.
I mean, you have software agents independently spending company capital and entering into vendor agreements without any verifiable oversight.
Yeah, it's wild. But, taking a company like that from a failing governance score to a compliant state sounds great on paper. But creating an immutable paper trail for an autonomous purchasing agent that's making hundreds of micro decisions a week, that has to be an administrative nightmare.
It is a massive undertaking.
So how do you step into a company where AI is already running wild and fix the engine while the plane is flying without breaking their workflow? You can't just shut down the factory's supply chain for a month to fix the code.
No, of course not. That's why it required phasing the intervention very carefully. The architect came in for a 20-week engagement, capped at just 15 hours a week.
Just 15 hours?
Yep. Phase 1, which ran through weeks 1 to 4, was purely about discovery and risk mapping. They identified 12 distinct live AI systems operating in production. And by mapping those against the EUAI Act's criteria, they found that 8 of them were legally classified as high risk.
Wow. And their governance score?
The company's initial governance score on that 1 to 5 scale was a 2.1.
Ouch. Which means the developers who actually built those systems were probably pretty resistant to an outsider coming in and, telling them their code was a legal liability.
There is always internal friction. Always. And that's exactly why Phase 2, from week 5 to 12, focused on architectural design and establishing authority. The fractional lead formed an AI governance committee. They pulled in key stakeholders from legal, procurement, and IT to ensure cross-functional buy-in.
Smart. Get everyone at the table.
Right. They systematically recategorized the risk of all 12 systems, designed the blueprint for the required audit trails, and drafted a formal AI governance charter. Crucially, they got the board of directors to approve that charter by week 10.
Ah, so they got the ultimate authority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That board approval provided the mandate needed to essentially force the engineering teams to comply.
And then phase 3 is where they actually write the code, right? So weeks 13 to 20.
Yes.
The source says they executed a focused 3-week development sprint to implement the logging infrastructure on those 8 high-risk systems. Then they trained the internal data science teams on how to actually manage those logs and ran mock compliance audits to prove the systems worked.
Yep, full end-to-end implementation.
And in the span of 20 weeks, working on a part-time basis, they elevated the manufacturer's governance score from a 2.1 to a 4.2. Total cost. 68,000 euros.
Now, when you measure that 68,000 euro investment against the 180,000 euro annualized burden of a full-time CTO,
Yeah, the math is just obvious.
let alone the potential multi-million euro regulatory fines, the return on investment is undeniable. The manufacturer achieved total compliance readiness on their high-risk agents, their internal teams were upskilled, and they secured a massive first-mover advantage within the Nordic manufacturing sector.
Okay, so that covers the organizational strategy and the cost. But I think we really need to examine the actual mechanics of the technology here, because the EUAI Act places incredibly strict, highly specific technical demands on any system classified as a high-risk agent.
It does, and it really stems from the definition of an agent itself.
Right.
An AI agent is an autonomous system that perceives its environment and takes action to achieve a specific goal without requiring human approval for every single step.
Which is great for efficiency.
Brilliant for efficiency, yes. But it creates a massive black hole for compliance. The law explicitly dictates that high-risk agents must generate and maintain a complete, immutable audit trail.
And just so we're all on the same page, an immutable log means it cannot be altered or deleted after the fact, even by the system administrators, right?
Precisely. If regulators investigate a decision your AI made, you must be able to produce the exact input data that triggered the action. You must log the specific version of the machine learning model that was running at that exact millisecond.
Wow, millisecond level precision.
Yep. You have to document any human overrides, apply precise cryptographic timestamps, and retain this granular level of data for 7 full years. Furthermore, it can't just be a massive, unreadable text file.
So no data dumping.
No data dumping allowed. The data must be structured so it can be queried efficiently during an audit.
7 years of granular decision data generated by an automated system. I mean, just the storage costs alone are significant. But the architectural challenge is even larger. The source points to something called event-driven logging as the required framework here.
Yes, event-driven logging is crucial.
Mechanically, my understanding is this means the system isn't just saving a summary report at the end of the day. Every single time the neural network hits a specific trigger or makes a choice, the architecture forces a permanent data snapshot of the system's state and its inputs at that exact moment.
Exactly. But capturing the inputs and outputs is only half the battle. The legislation demands transparency regarding the internal logic of the AI, too. Regulators will not accept the neural network decided to do it as a valid legal defense.
But the computer said so, it doesn't work anymore.
It definitely doesn't. This requires the implementation of explainability middleware. The briefing specifically highlights tools like SHAPE and Lime.
Okay, let's break those down because they are really critical. SHAPE, which stands for Shapley Additive Explanations, right?
That's right.
It essentially borrows concepts from game theory. It treats every single data point feeding into the AI as a player in a game, and it calculates exactly how much credit each data point deserves for the AI's final decision.
A really elegant way to look at it, yeah.
And then Lime does something similar by creating a simplified, localized map of the AI's complex math. Basically, these middleware tools sit on top of the AI and peek inside the black box. They translate the billions of calculations happening in a neural network into a human-readable summary of why a specific choice was made.
They're translation layers, essentially. They allow a company to prove mathematically that, for instance, a procurement agent rejected a vendor because of their historical delivery delays.
Rather than some biased reason.
Right, rather than some biased or legally discriminatory variable hidden deep in the training data.
But applying these tools raises a massive operational question for me. What about legacy AI? If I built an incredible AI tool in 2023, before these regulations were drafted, it obviously wasn't built with event-driven logging natively integrated.
It wouldn't be.
Do I have to tear it all down because it doesn't have these fancy event logs? Because if you are forcing every single micro decision that legacy AI makes through a SHAP translation layer to generate these explainability values, you are inevitably going to create a processing bottleneck. Adding a middleware wrapper around a legacy model has to introduce significant latency.
Your deduction is spot on, and it is one of the most difficult conversations fractional architects have to navigate.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that constructing a compliance wrapper around a legacy model logs the decision context without altering the underlying code. But it introduces an average latency overhead of 10 to 15%.
10 to 15%.
Yeah. Every single decision takes a fraction of a second longer, because the middleware has to run its explainability calculations.
Which means the viability of a wrapper entirely depends on the use case. I mean, if it's a chatbot drafting an email, A 15% delay is completely invisible to the user.
Nobody notices.
Right. But if the legacy AI is running high-frequency financial trading or actively managing robotic safety protocols on a manufacturing floor, that latency completely destroys the utility of the system.
Exactly. And this is why a fractional architect evaluates the architecture system by system. If a legacy model cannot tolerate the latency of a middleware wrapper, and it cannot be retrofitted natively without millions of euros in development time, the architect's recommendation is often brutal.
They just say shut it down.
Deprecate the system,
Yeah.
shut it down entirely. It is a very difficult pill for an enterprise to swallow, abandoning a tool that works. But the calculation is actually pretty simple. The cost of rebuilding a natively compliant system from scratch is significantly lower than absorbing a 30 million euro fine.
Yeah, that math checks out. And that transition from discussing processing latency to shutting down active systems leads perfectly into the next major insight. Because here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, the cultural aspect.
Yes. We spend immense amounts of time talking about machine learning, analyzing neural network weights, middleware wrappers, and data storage. But reading through the methodology of the Aethermind scan, it becomes blatantly obvious that the ultimate bottleneck preventing compliance isn't the technology, it's actually human incentive.
Absolutely.
You can architect the most elegant, mathematically perfect, event-driven logging system in the world, but if the engineering culture actively resists it, the framework will fail.
The source data explicitly states that a full 30% of a fractional consultant's effort must be aggressively dedicated to change management. 30%. Technical frameworks just collapse without executive alignment, rigorous role clarity, and continuous training.
The briefing details this concept they call incentive alignment, which addresses the core psychological friction in basically any development team. Developers and product managers are traditionally incentivized and bonused based on speed.
Move fast and break things.
Right. Exactly. How fast can you ship this new feature? How quickly can you deploy this agent? The source argues that if you do not explicitly rewrite their key performance indicators, their KPIs, to include governance and compliance, human nature will take the path of least resistance.
It always does.
If implementing the required logging delays a product launch by 2 weeks, and a developer's bonus depends on hitting that launch date, they will inevitably find a workaround to skip the compliance steps.
You have to make legal compliance a core metric of their professional success, which requires a fundamental rewiring of the corporate culture. And rewriting culture takes significantly more time than writing code.
Much more time.
The source breaks down the necessary timeline for this shift quarter by quarter. The foundation phase must happen between Q4 of 2024 and Q1 of 2025. This involves engaging the fractional lead, running the diagnostic readiness scan, and forcing the board to adopt the governance charter.
Because without that foundational authority, the actual build phase will just be blocked by internal politics.
Precisely. That leads into Q2 and Q3 of 2025, which is the implementation phase. This is when the development teams actually tear apart their workflows to build the audit trails, and the change management initiatives are pushed down to the individual contributor level.
Okay, so that's the heavy lifting. What's the final step?
Finally, Q4 of 2025 is reserved strictly for hardening and audit readiness. This means the systems are built, and the entire quarter is spent running mock audits, stress testing the logs, and finalizing the required legal documentation before the 2026 deadlines hit.
So if you're a CEO or a technical lead listening to this, and you are planning to wait until mid-2025 to start thinking about EUAI Act compliance, the math simply does not work in your favor.
Not at all.
By mid-2025, you are facing drastically compressed timelines. You will be forcing your engineering teams to rush implementations, which inevitably leads to mistakes. Your internal teams will be exhausted and highly resistant to a sudden, panicked cultural shift.
Burnout is a real risk there.
And the financial cost of remediation trying to hire specialized consultants when the entire European market is simultaneously panicking and scrambling for the exact same talent, it's going to skyrocket.
The human side of compliance cannot be rushed. Attempting to compress a 12-month cultural and architectural overhaul into 3 months is just a guaranteed recipe for a failed regulatory audit.
We have covered incredible ground today. I mean, moving from the macroeconomic scale of EU regulatory penalties down to the granular mechanics of SHAP explainability middleware and the friction of human incentive. As we pull all of these threads together, let's distill the core insights.
Sounds good.
For me, the number one takeaway is the sheer strategic efficiency of the fractional leadership model. When you look at the reality of the mid-market, allocating 68,000 euros to completely de-risk your enterprise's operations over a 20-week period is not just an administrative cost-saving measure.
It's an investment.
It is a profound competitive advantage. It solves the immediate legal threat without bloated executive overhead, leaving capital free to continue innovating and capturing market share while your competitors are paralyzed by compliance fears. What stands out to you as the ultimate takeaway?
For me, it's the uncompromising reality of the technical demands. The legislation leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity. Immutable audit trails and explainability middleware are non-negotiable requirements for high-risk agents. The research projects that a staggering 72% of enterprises currently deploying autonomous systems will fail their initial compliance assessments.
72%. That is wild.
It's huge. The dividing line between an organization that dominates its sector in 2026 and one that is crippled by multi-million euro fines comes down entirely to the early, rigorous implementation of event-driven logging. You cannot reverse engineer an immutable audit trail after a regulator knocks on your door.
No, you certainly cannot retroactively generate 7 years of cryptographic data.
You can't.
Yeah.
And looking at the harsh reality that some legacy systems simply cannot handle the latency of compliance wrappers and must be completely deprecated, it introduces a fascinating, slightly concerning variable for the future.
What do you mean?
Well, if governance maturity is the ultimate competitive advantage of 2026, it raises an important question. Will the most successful AI companies of the future be the ones with the smartest algorithms, or simply the ones with the most legally transparent paperwork? Because if companies are forced to delete or shut down their highest performing, perfectly optimized legacy AI purely because it can't be wrapped in legal paperwork, it makes you wonder.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Are we about to see the emergence of a massive dark market of illegal, hyper-efficient AI models, systems operating entirely off the books, hidden deep within corporate networks, just so companies can maintain a hidden competitive edge against those playing by the rules?
A dark market of unlogged, high-speed autonomous agents. That is a deeply unsettling yet entirely plausible outcome of this regulatory pressure. We open this deep dive by noting that a clock is ticking for European enterprises. Whether your strategy is to bring in a fractional architect to surgically address the gaps or to begin the arduous process of building an internal compliance division from the ground up, the only definitively wrong move right now is continuing to do nothing. For more AI insights, visit etherlink.ai.